Good afternoon, everyone. We are starting today for the next few days on three chapters of the book of Psalms. Today we begin with an all-time favorite, and it's also my personal favorite. And it begins with Psalms chapter 1, right here. However, as we begin, I would like to give us a bit of a background. When we come to the Psalms, these chapters and this book doesn't read very much like all the other books that we have done so far. We have covered the minor prophets and then the major prophets with Isaiah, and we ended with Jeremiah. And you have seen the style of writing that there is a lot of repetition. If you remember the A and the B, or A, B, and C, where they actually repeat the idea a few times, 2 or 3 times, sometimes 4 times, with variations, but the intent is for an emphasis of an idea. And so we've seen that. We have also taken a look, when we look at the prophets, that we need to pay attention to the audience, whether it's the northern kingdom, the house of Israel, or the southern kingdom, the house of Judah, and so on and so forth. Now, very seldom do we come across poetry in the prophet books, but we do see a few pieces of poetry. Now, when we get to the Psalms, or what we call the songs, in Hebrew, they are songs and they are poetry, meaning there is what we call rhythm. And this is not our modern day poetry rhythm, not modern day contemporary songs, not even Shakespearean or Elizabethan or Victorian style, but there is rhythm, and this is Hebrew rhythm. Hebrew rhythm gives us what we call chiasm. Don't worry about these are big words. Just know that there are rhythms where the first line may meet with the last line, and then the second line meets with the second last line, and so on and so forth. And these are called chiasms. And that's a style of writing, the style of presenting. So you would see that the poetic line begins by introducing the concepts, and then they will wrap up the concepts in parallel, but in later verses. So that's chiasms. You would also find what we see as the A's and B's, right? When we have the A's and B's, that would be the synonyms. They're trying to say the same thing twice or 3 times, but using slightly different words. And then we see the A and the A prime, that they are opposites, or what you call antonyms. So these are general concepts of poetry. Now, obviously, poetry in Hebrew is virtually impossible to explain using an English text. I would try what I can to reveal the underlying, as I have tried, but especially in poetry, it is impossible to see the manner of expressions, because it has a lot to do with the sounds of the words. But because we are reading it in the English, and what we have on the screen is the New King James, the translation in English will lose all the rhythms as well as the rhyme. And when the rhyme comes, what we call rhymes would be the play of words, right? Play of words. And the play of words will be similar sounding words, but giving different meanings. And we can't see that in the English. So so there is a limit to what we can do in our daily classes. But more importantly for us in our daily classes is to take a look at some of the underlying Hebrew, give us a better flavor so that when we read our favorite Psalms, we have a better understanding, that you bear this in mind. Now, two more things I want to say about Psalms. One, people say that poetry has very little meaning. It gives you flowery meanings. I would tend to differ. The reason being is the Psalms are actually lessons that is expressed in a poetic way. Not in the normal didactic, meaning straight instructions like when you read in the book of Deuteronomy, or when we were covering in the prophet books, no, thus says the Lord, and these are the things that God says. We don't have that kind of an articulation in the Psalms. What we have in the Psalms would be people responding to events, to situations, to their expressions of emotions, and to how God would inspire some of these Psalms, particularly with David. Now, David didn't write all the Psalms, but he did write many of the Psalms, particularly this one that we're starting with. And these are words of wisdom penned and constructed in some poetic fashion, which we are not used to. So for now, let us kind of put the Hebrew poetry aside, but understand that these are lessons expressed in poetic styles. Number two, the final thing I want to say is that these Psalms that we have, and I believe there are many more Psalms that were penned, but we only have this set of 150, and they are used in temple worship. And many of us may not know that in the temple worship, they have choirs, and the choirs are made up of the Levites, and they play the music and they would sing the Psalms. And the Psalms can be read in Hebrew poetic style and in a very sing-song manner. And in a number of occasions in the Psalms, you will see what we call Hebraic musical notes. And you can only see that in the Hebrew text. With all the cantillations, and we call it cantillations. There are little marks where when somebody who knows how to read Hebrew, they will be able to lift up the voice. It will be louder, softer, higher, lower. And then you have what it's similar to our music notations like forte, pianissimo, and you have rests. And that's where you read the word Selah. And so do remember when you read the Psalms for your devotions that they are songs in Hebrews, but they are made up of lessons in a poetic form. So let's begin with Psalm 1. One of the biggest challenges in reading the Psalms that many of us have is that when we read the words, we may understand the individual English words, but when we put it all together in a sentence, it's very hard to explain. And the reason being is that the translation is a challenge. First of all, don't get me wrong, it is fairly, if not very difficult, to translate Hebrew into English. The nuances and the concepts of Hebrew is hard. But when you read the Psalms, Anna, remember one thing. They are imagery driven. Hebrew is a very imagery language. And so oftentimes when you read the book of Psalms, after a sentence or two, take a step back and look at the entire picture. What is the psalmist trying to render in the screen of our minds, and that will help us understand this a bit better. So let's begin. Blessed is the man. And right off the start, the word blessed is not your normal blessing word. The word blessed here literally means happiness. Being happy. So Psalm 1 begins the book of Psalms with the address of happiness, asher. Basically, to render it, how should we say, when things are straight, when you walk a path and the path is straight and level, you are happy. So whenever you look at the Hebrew words, the context of the Hebrew words are very much built around agriculture, traveling, journeying, fishing, about the rain, about the environment, about nature. And that's the kind of imagery. So blessed here is happy is the man, or happiness belongs to the man. And then we have a set of three things here. Walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scornful. One of the things that drives this verse is this word not. This word not literally tells all of these, do not. Right? Do not is the way that this phrase is, these three lines is expressed. So blessed is the man. Happiness belongs to the man who does not walk, who does not stand, and who does not sit. But more importantly are these three verbs. The walk, stand, and sit are normal, what we call human interaction of standing, walking, standing, and sitting. And what you find is that the Hebrew gives us a picture that it is not in the present tense. The Hebrew gives us a picture of what we call the perfect tense. Now, let me just briefly explain to us what a perfect tense means. This is important just for us to understand a bit of Hebrew, but more so in Psalm 1. A perfect tense means action completed. In the simplest form, actions completed. And so happiness is the man who have stopped walking, stopped standing, and stopped sitting. That's the picture. You cannot be happy if you are still walking. You cannot be happy when you're still standing and you're still sitting. And so the picture here is you may be in a journey and then you are walking in the path, but you're walking in the counsel of the ungodly. So the people around you are the people who are what we call the wicked, right? The wicked, the Rasha, people who have departed from the way. So what does that mean is that if you are walking on a journey, that you are in the advice and the company of people who have departed from the way of God, what does that make this man? This man would be walking with the ungodly. You see the whole picture? And so the Psalm says, if you want happiness, you should be the man who have stopped walking in the company of the ungodly, nor stands in the paths of sinners. Now, the path of sinners is this. You have a journey, and then we have the sinner. The sinner is the one who have missed the laws of God, the instructions of God, and they are on the path. And so what happens is that if you are, and if they are walking this way and you are standing there, you're blocking their path. But what does the picture tells us? You are in the path of the sinners, and they will walk by you because you are part of them. You see the picture? Nor sits in the seat of the scornful. The word scornful are the ones who mock, and they will talk all the empty words and emptiness, and they will mock God. And so these are times when people sit around and just talk about things, and you're sitting there in their seat as well. So what does that make you? You're part of them. And so hence the whole picture here in verse 1 is that you do not walk, stand, and sit, and you should stop. And so this is the perfect tense. That if you want happiness, you should be the man who have stopped walking, standing, and sitting in all these participation. You see the imagery that is driving. That's what the Psalms is all about. It's all about imagery, and that's what you're painting in your mind. So it is not the word definitions that makes a whole lot of sense. It is the entire picture that it tries to paint. Verse 2. Now in verse 2, there is the word but. The word but is really not there in the Hebrew, unfortunately. The idea here is the literal words that is here is that if. Okay? There's no but that if this man's delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. Again, this is a picture. So one, we have do not, but number 2 is do. Do this. But do this is, you see a big if there? We don't see the if in the English, but the if is there in the Hebrew. It means that this is a choice. You want to be happy? Yes, you stop, but you have to choose. Choose what? Delight. Delight here means a longing, a desire. There's a picture that you lean towards. I'm not sure whether you grow any plants in a shade, but over time the plant will bend out towards the sun because the plant delights in sunshine. And so the idea of delight means there is an intentional bending towards. That's the word delight. Or I guess if we were sitting in along tables, and then your neighbor opens up a Musang King, and the aroma comes out. And so there is a natural tendency, that is, if you love durians like me, you would lean over to where the aroma is coming from just to see what durians they have opened. That is what the Hebrew means by delight. So you lean towards, that's your choice, that's your desire. And this word here, law, is Torah. Please do not be afraid of the word Torah. The word Torah comes from the word yara. And the word yara means to throw a finger. And so what does this mean? It means to point. Or you have a river and the river is flowing. And when the river flows, it flows in one direction. And so you get the picture of a Torah. The Torah comes from the base word of yara, and it gives us the understanding that these will be instructions, to instruct, right? Or directions. And hence, Torah literally means instructions. Whose instructions? God's instructions. So whenever you read the word Torah, it literally means the way that God points us to live so that we know where to walk and which direction to go. And so the man who is happy has stopped doing this, but then if you choose, you need to lean towards the Torah of the Lord. And in God's Torah, you meditate. Now we have this modern word, meditate. This is not our modern day meditation. If you recall, I'm not sure whether you've watched anyone who is a Jew who actually meditates on the word in the synagogue, any show of that nature. They would mumble to themselves. Meaning they would repeat, they would mumble, and they would muse, and they would think about what they are doing. And one of the things they do is that they move around, right? To keep the brains moving, I think, right? They lift up their heels. And the whole idea of meditating is to ponder and to reflect. You go to a pond like Lake Gardens or any lake, and you look at the reflection of the sky and you think about it. So the law of God is like the lake that you reflect. Now, day and night it means by day and by night. It doesn't mean that 24 hours a day, you're always meditating. That's not what it means. If you really want to delight in the Torah of the Lord, you need to reflect it when there is day and when it's night. Meaning, whenever you have a chance, and then the result will be this. This is the result. And right now, from verses 3 to verse 6 would be a picture. What picture would that be? Now, if you read this, and he shall be like. The word like is as. And the moment you see words like this, immediately, it is to tell us now, start looking at this imagery clearly in your mind, because it begins with a tree. The tree that is transplanted. Now, we read of heart transplant. Here it is tree transplant, meaning the tree was uprooted from another place and now replanted. Put the roots down into the ground, and then you see it is by or beside, because you don't plant a tree in the water, right? But what we do see is that the tree is replanted, and it says rivers of water. And the idea of rivers is channels, right? Channels. Now, if you are in agriculture, you will find that you will need to divert water, and this water would be channels, and it will be slow but moving water. And the tree will have water, and it's always irrigated. That's the whole idea. When a tree is irrigated, it's a good environment. So look at the picture. Now, one of the things that we tend to miss in the Hebraic terms is water. Water that is flowing is called living water, meaning it is alive, it carries oxygen. And that's why if you have an aquarium, water must be flowing, right? And water that is in a container, in a tank or in a cistern is called dead water. Why dead? Because the water is not moving and it will have no more oxygen soon enough. And so this tree is transplanted by channels of living water. And this tree will bring forth. Bring forth meaning bear fruit, right? I think the word is give. See, trees or fruit trees don't bear fruit the whole year round. And in Israel, the fruits are born in the summer months. When the time comes, then it will bring forth fruit. And so a tree, in this case, a fruit tree, is giving this picture that it has nourishment and it's a good environment. It's been replanted there, and in its season. In its season means in its moment, in its time, right? In its, well, I guess season is also a good word, because in its right time, it will bring forth fruit, right? And that's what people plant fruit trees for. Whose leaf, and the word leaf here, I think would be the branches and leaves. The foliage. So when you look at the tree and you look up on the tree, it is green and it's strong. Its branches are strong there. And the picture here, it will not wither. And the idea of withering is very much to fade away, to wilt, right? To wilt or fall away. Now, what does that mean? It means that if it has no nourishment, it will drop. But here, because of the rivers or channels of living water, that is not going to be the case. It will be healthy, it will be fruitful, right? And then it goes on to a human representation, and whatever he, who is he? His delight, and it's this man that David is talking about. And whatever he does shall prosper. Now, this is a very Hebrew concept. So let me just paint this picture. The idea of do, right? The idea of do is to make. This is important. It is something that it can be seen that you produce. And prosper literally means cause to progress. Cause to progress. So if you were to plant fruits, well, you use a baby plant and the plant will grow and it will progress into bearing fruits, and that's prosper. So it is not the Chinese view of prosperity where you've got money in mind. Prosper means you do things and you are successful. You can push through. So when you plant fruit trees, fruits will be born. When you plant wheat, lots of wheat will be harvested. That is what this means. So this man is successful, like how Genesis portrayed Joseph. In whatever Joseph did, everything was good. And that's where they see that God was with him. And so that's the word to prosper. And this is the man himself, right? The man who wants to be happy. Now we have 3 last verses. It's a very short psalm, but in verse 4, it gives us a contrast. And so we have 2 and 3, verses 4 and 5. You notice? 2 and 3, 4 and 5. And this would be A and an A prime. And these are contrasts. They are the opposite. Now look at this. We were talking about the happy man, but the ungodly are not so. Now the ungodly are the ones who depart from the way. This man would delight in the way. What is the way? The Torah, the law of God, right? And the description here is another imagery. These ungodly are like chaff. Now, chaff is a very important concept. If you look at wheat, for example, right? If this is wheat, and right at the tip of the wheat, you would have what we call the fruit of the wheat. And the fruit of the wheat looks something like this. And then inside, you would find the wheat. And so what we do see is we have what we call husk. And the inside would be the wheat. And if you think of it like rice, right? The husk of the rice and the inside would be the fruit of the rice. Now, when you break the husk, then you get the rice. The husk is the chaff. Now, the chaff is thrown into the air. And then the wheat, being heavy, would fall onto the pan, but the wind will blow it away. And the wind here would be a strong wind that will come and it will scatter. Now, if you know, in a strong wind, when you throw something into the air, things will be blown all over the place, and that's what it is. They are like chaff. Why? Because they are of no use. Now, it's not true that chaff is of no use, but it's to be thrown away. Now, the other part of using the chaff and the lower part of it is actually to make soap, right? Therefore, the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. Now, this is another picture. See, we have an imagery, and then we have a person. Okay? We have an imagery, and then we have a person. You see, these are structures of poetry. And so the ungodly and sinners are the ones who depart, and the sinners is khata, the ones who miss what God tells them to do. And so if they are sinners, they will not be able to stand, right, in the judgment of the godly. That's by implication. By godly means the one who is in the way of the Lord. The sinners are the ones who have not done the right things of the law of God. And so the righteous would be the ones who have done right. And so the idea here is that the ungodly and the sinners will not be able to mingle and conform to the ones who are obeying God based on his Torah. That's the picture. This is the ones that is being described as the righteous, right? The happy ones. Because God is saying you follow the law, you meditate on it day and night, you delight in the law of God. Well, that's what you are. But the conclusion is in verse 6. Let me just show you the conclusion. The word that. This word for is the word that, because. So after discussing two types of people, 1 and 2, there is a conclusion. The conclusion is this: Jehovah knows the way. This is important. Now, this is also the imagery of traveling, right? So the Lord knows. And the word knows here is yada, and the idea here is he perceives. And he can see to discern. In the Hebrew context, everything about knowing, hearing, doing, walking, they are all linked together as active, visible events. And so God says, the way, the way. What is the way? The way is the road, right? The way is the road. This is the way. And God knows the way. And what does God know? The way of the righteous. So we have the righteous. Who are the righteous? Well, God will say the righteous is the one who goes on the right way. That is based on the Torah of the Lord, right? So when you are following the Torah of God, the instructions of God, you're walking the right way. So God knows the way of the righteous. What do you mean God knows the way of the righteous? Well, God can see where the righteous is walking and where it will end. That's more important. And where will it end? By definition, with God, and he will have life. Now, we have another imagery. The way of the ungodly shall perish. Now, the ungodly are the ones who depart, right? Who depart from the right way. So where is the one going? He will be the one going here. So he departs, and he is called the ungodly. One who departs. And where will the end be? And this is the end. And the idea here is perish. Now, the word perish is avad. Let me just give you the word avad. And avad literally means to lose yourself. To lose yourself. And then wander away. And then perish. You see the picture of this word perish? It is talking about a person who leaves the way and he keeps walking, wander away, he's lost. He doesn't come back to the right way. And so eventually he will end up perish. And that's the picture of verse 6 in the final term. So let's do a quick conclusion. Remember, when we first started, we spoke about happiness. Happiness, right? Happiness is this man here who is walking in the right way. and he has stopped doing all the wrong things. And he continues in this journey because he delights, he leans towards the instructions of God. So the picture here is, in due time, he will bear fruit. All these things about meditating on the Torah day and night, it's to benefit him to grow as a person, that whatever he does shall prosper. And that's because he's doing what God wants him to do. But the ungodly is moving away here, see? And if he doesn't come back, then he will not be on the right way, and he keeps going on the wrong way, and eventually will meet his natural ending, which is to perish. And so with this, you can now see that the Psalms is actually not difficult to understand, but they are very imagery driven. Now, a little bit of Hebrew helps, but what helps more is to be able to take one step back and look at the picture, the image that the words are trying to paint in your mind. And once you understand that, the bigger picture, then you will see that that gives you the vivid instructions. That would be the moral lessons from Psalm chapter 1. And so with this, I trust that we will know that happiness is contrasted with perish. See, happiness, perish. That's the contrast. The more you walk away from God, there is no happiness. So the happy man, and I presume all of us want to be happy, is the one who stops doing everything God tells us not to do. Do not take company in those things that leads us astray. But by choice, in verse 2, if we delight in the law of the Lord, that we want to find out more about the way of the Lord, the directions of the path. And with that, the picture is very beautiful. The fruit bearing, we're in a great environment, there's living water, and whatever we do as individuals, we will prosper. We will be happy, isn't it, when we are moving forward in things that we do. But those who depart from the way, they will not prosper in the way God described. They will be going all over the place, and they cannot stand in the presence of those who are godly, of those who are righteous. Why? Because they will be ashamed. Now, by implication, if you look at it from an imagery viewpoint, do you not think that God is using this to excite and invoke the person who is standing and sitting in those areas, to stop doing it and to turn back to God? Yes. God doesn't want this person's end to be perish right here. God wants this person's end to be life right here. And hence God knows the way, and God is watching. And that's chapter 1. And David's psalm gives us a very good boost of morale. Whenever you read Psalm 1, it gives me goosebumps. That really, God wants us to walk right with him at all times. And if we don't, repent, come back, because now we know what's going to happen to the way of the ungodly. And hence, that would be the end of Psalms chapter 1.